La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Welcome back to La Lanterna podcast from both of us, Fabrizio and my friend.
And Matt Killen. Welcome back.
Hi, and hello to everyone to our episode number 5 of Lanterna podcast. Now, Matt, this is that dull period where we don't really know what to say, what to do with ourselves. Like, I know there's a little bit of interest for some anyways, for the national team, and also, unhappiness. But from my side, I also have Canada that has been, it's going to be participating through the World Cup. Yoo-hoo, after
there you go.
So many years. And,
well deserved, by the way.
And you guys as well for the United States. So that will be quite interesting.
That's right.
So at least we'll be busy. That's November though, right? It's not in the summer.
That's right. Yeah. I just saw also some strange Premier League rule where only 6 teams in particular cannot be scheduled. The top 6 teams in England cannot be scheduled to play that weekend before the World Cup, because I guess the fixtures are running right up until that previous weekend. So they're doing a little bit of preferential scheduling there for some of the, I think probably the thinking was most of the English squad players would be in those 6 teams, but still probably rubs a certain way for some folks. So
for sure. It's almost like a preferential treatment to just the top 6 versus all the other ones. But having said that, so Serie A will have a break.
Yes.
Now we're not going to be part of Serie A this coming season, sadly to say. But interesting to say that we're going to be learning more about the Serie Cadetta, how we said in Italian, which is the Serie B.
Yep.
So Serie B will not be interrupted. So it will happen during the World Cup. So it'll be kind of interesting trying to juggle between the two.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I don't know about you, but independently from what Canada or the United States do, I think it's still interesting to watch it all the way through. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the World Cup. I tend to watch each round, and obviously I'll pay attention to all the USA games and tune into those. But I mean, it should be also, the format's a little different. You got more teams participating, some teams making their debuts, potentially some drama. We'll see what happens with, I don't know if a friend of mine wrote a recent piece for the New Yorker about this kind of scandal with Ecuador and potentially them being disqualified because of a player's birth certificate or lack thereof.
Plus a lot of Italians were, for a second, they were hoping that Italy would be the one called up, which is basically no.
Yeah, possibly, right. So I don't know. I love the World Cup. I tend to watch as many matches as I can, but I'll also say I don't think I'll be upset to have more football on hand during that period of time, especially if some of the matches are getting kind of dull, So
I know, for sure. And as I said, Serie B is going to be happening, so that'll be quite interesting. I'm starting to learn a little bit, and I'm sorry for all our listeners, if there are any, from Serie B, to tell them that I don't really know. I mean, wasn't following it too much, but I do have very good friends among the teams and whatnot, like good friends from Cosenza I have, and good friends from also Cittadella. So those are the 2 closest ones that through and I'm nothing against anyone else, of course, but these are the 2 closest that I have that I keep in touch anyways through social media. What about you? Do you know anyone from the Serie Cadetta?
Really, I don't. Obviously, being a fan of the sport in general, of course, people will recognize the Brescias just because of, Baggio's time there. Parma, of course, is a big name and had been on hard times recently back in Serie A, back down in Serie B. But this is sort of a learning experience for me too. I mean, some of these clubs I'm happy to see Cremonese back up in Serie A just because I think those kits are pretty cool. The silver and red it's kind of a unique thing there. But for me, it's going to be also getting more familiar with some of these clubs that haven't always been as much in the limelight.
Did you just say silver and red, Matt?
Isn't that the color? Yeah. How do you say?
Yeah. No, it's funny because I've never associated that with that color, which is true, mind you, but
Yeah.
I have always associated them to gray and red.
Gray.
But
Yeah. Well, really gray. Yeah. It's
yeah, it's fine. No, it's nice. It's interesting.
yeah.
I mean, to
So
see also these new faces in Serie A can be something interesting. Now, how it's going to pan out with respects to who's going to survive or not with Monzas and
yep.
the Lecce and Cremonese themselves, I wish them all the best of luck because it's nice to see new faces as well, not the usual that go up and then come back down. And as we said the other week, I think it was Matt that we said that the Serie B now probably rebaptized, quote unquote, I'm using the fingers, like the Serie A2. I've heard a lot of things where, it's going to be interesting. It's always been considered a very tough league, underestimated and undervalued league.
Yep.
There is a lot of fluff, unfortunately, but there's also a lot of strong teams, and it's a tough league to go through. And as a lot of newspapers I've read, they're saying, and also everybody that you hear, anyways, that we have to build a team to win the championship and come back immediately, because once you stay there more than 1 year, it might be very difficult to come back fast.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, listen, you've got several teams in Serie B that were not that long ago in Serie A, I mean,
Let's list them. Yeah.
we talked about Parma. I think there are several kind of challenges that we have coming up against this. Frosinone is a team that wasn't that long ago in Serie A. Benevento. Those are teams maybe you wouldn't expect to stay in Serie A for very long, but still, they've already been down.
Brescia.
Brescia, absolutely.
Right. And then not to mention the other two with us that came down with us, which are Cagliari and Venezia.
That's right. So we've got a little bit of a battle on our hands, I think.
So let me just say one thing that I remembered about last episode, Matt, where we said, "Oh my God, did you hear about Benevento?" Now I'm going to say it back to you.
Yes.
Oh my God, did you hear what happened now?
No.
The owner got back into it.
Yeah, so I was curious about that because obviously there was the big news for anybody that didn't listen to the last episode, which if you didn't, you should, was that the Benevento owner just for some reason had walked away, wiped his hands. I think he met with like the mayor or something, and just decided he didn't want to. I think he just didn't want to pay anymore. I can't remember what it was, but essentially not signing the paperwork, which to stay in the league, you have to basically affirmatively say, we are going to enter Serie B. And he's basically, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to own. I'm walking away. All of a sudden, I think they go all the way down to Serie D. I don't know if you can go farther than that in the system that way. But yeah, I didn't hear that he came back on. What happened?
So I didn't read it fully, so I apologize, and hopefully someone can correct us or we'll read a little bit better about it. Anyways, something about the fact that the owner lately had seen a lot of loss in followership, loss of interest, no more families going to the stadium. So he lost that. He saw that there was a loss of love towards the team. So it was more essentially what it looked like. Essentially, was a shake to the fanship and just say, "Are you still there?" And that was his way to wake him up or something. Yeah.
And now
That's
back.
quite bizarre. Anyways, so getting ready for the Serie B, as we said, that's going to be a tough one. And what does that mean? That means we've all heard this magic number 70. What is that?
So our player list, 70.
Oh
players,
my God, Matt, that's
70
players
on our books, which is incredible.
Now, let me add one thing before we start to get into the players, so if you don't mind. So a lot of people complained about 777 because of their, being junior, being made their own errors, which is possibly true. Hopefully not the same that Parma is or has done.
Right.
But nevertheless, what I have seen, it was essentially that right now, one thing that makes me sleep at night, essentially, is that they're working strongly at the managerial level. So, yes, a lot of people. I was reading these couple of journalists from Italy, and saying now let's stop with this. Working on the managerial level. Let's start with talking about the players, who to get for next year, and who to sell, and so on. But if you don't have a good foundation, how are you going to survive in the long run? And that's what the 7-7 did say when they came in. We're not here for the short term. We're not here just to make a buck and leave or something. We're here for the long-term investment. Mm-hmm. And they're putting good foundations. Even right now, a lot of people were saying, well, there's a whole bunch of foreigners and stuff like that, which is not necessarily a nice thing to hear, especially from us living from the North American side, sure, which we're used to. Multicultural and so on. Sure. But hearing it in Italy, it kind of hurt me in a way. But what happened there was also, I heard that they got this new manager, Italian, and he's going to be working on the exit strategy with taking care of a lot of players to get rid of them on the book. So
that's right.
That circles back to our 70 players. So there's a whole bunch of movement there, right, Matt?
Yeah, it's a huge list. I mean, we were just looking at it a little bit ago. There are players on there I thought that we didn't even have on contract anymore. There are some, to be fair, as we were kind of looking through this, that are more Primavera players that I imagine will still have probably under contract, that also I imagine are not going to be terribly expensive for us to keep around. But I think one of the immediate kind of tasks of the new sort of regime is clearing out some of the dead wood. I know, we've got players like Abdoulaye Touré, who I don't know how we're going to kind of get rid of him or what we're going to do there.
What about Biraski? Exactly, David Biraski.
I mean, I feel like he's a player at least that had I don't know if he necessarily has as bad of maybe a name in that sense. And I think at the very least, we could probably sell him to a rival in Serie B or something like that. He's played in Serie A. He's got a decent number of games underneath him. He's experienced. He's relatively inexpensive. And then you kind of go down the list. There's some other guys who maybe could be useful, like Gaggero on loan last season at Brescia, so he's already got a taste. He's younger. We probably are going to need central midfield options. I think you'd kind of asked the question earlier on social media what we think about Agudelo. I'm curious what your thoughts on him. I think there's some promise there, but I'm interested to your take.
He's an interesting player. I still liked him when he first arrived. Young. I mean, not too young. If you think about it, he's 23. I think he could bring good value to our Serie B. Is he willing to stay down in Serie B? That's a different story.
That's true.
And the other big question, does he fall under Spore's picture, right? That the biggest question is just like, we're going to talk about a few players soon, but essentially the biggest question, like a lot of people are talking back and forth, who's potential, who's not potential of all these loanees that are all out and coming back. But essentially, is he a valid player for the Spurs model?
Well, I saw an interesting quote from Blessing, I think in Gazzetta dello Sport, where he said something, the translation might not have been exactly right, but it was basically something to the effect of, it is going to be a difficult preparation. Anybody that is signing on needs to be ready. And we are going to be, I think he was emphasizing that kind of total football, like everyone's running up the pitch type approach. I think you're right that maybe Agudelo doesn't fit that as well as some other players do. And I'm not sure that Blesson would necessarily handpick him as a player to fit the system. Probably what we need more than anything else is continuity within the side. I mean, one of the things we have, I know this is sort of a cliche. This is not something any of us would have wished, but now that we are in Serie B, now that we need to make these kind of decisions and tighten a little bit, it gives us a chance to say, how many players in this system really do fit what we're trying to do? And, you don't want to be in a situation where you have players who are talented, but don't exactly fit the style of, the vision of the team, because then you get all these other things. You have maybe preferential treatment for a player, which hopefully, I don't think Blesson is a manager like that, but sometimes you could have that. You could have locker room unrest where some players are really working hard and there's just that one player out of the 11 that's not. And sometimes that leads to a mistake that can be costly. So I wouldn't like to see him go, but at the same time, if he did, I don't know if I would feel as badly about it. I think obviously we need to replace, and in that position in the attacking side, it's still something I think there should be a place where we're thinking about strengthening for sure. I mean, it was a pain point all season for us. We couldn't score any goals. And then
No,
he's
exactly.
a wing player.
And he's definitely one of those players that brings that ball from the midfield all the way up. He's like that trequartista type of thing. So he would definitely I think he can bring good value to the team. Let me just backtrack 1 second on a side note about that. Is essentially that the rumors came out, and now I think it was, let me just double check. Yeah, 10 hours ago, it was officialized by the club, the retiro, so the retreat for the summer camp or the summer retreat will be still in Austria. That was kind of already in the air. They have finalized it to be Bad Herring, which is, some people were just playing a pun on those words, right? Saying, oh, that we're going to start really good right now with that Bad Herring. Anyways, it's about 100 kilometers south of Munich, but it's in Austria, about, I don't know, 50, 100 kilometers east of Innsbruck. And anyway, so that's going to be from the 18th to the 28th of July. So why I brought that up was for the fact that my understanding is the Retiro kind of almost sort of started already or somehow, and that's for Blessing to start to evaluate some of the players that are either coming back that he does not know. So I guess that's also very interesting to know, to see what's the outcome. Some people are sort of complaining that because they want the doors to be open to be able to go and see them, but I think everything is at closed doors. But essentially, that's what he's working on too. So I guess this Agudelo and or others are being currently evaluated, which is quite important too, right?
Yeah. I think it's all part of the process, and I don't mind. I know that Stefano, our recent guest, I think on the pod, maybe is a little bit begrudged that there won't be as much public kind of access to the players there. But I think it's a good thing for at least us to have some focus on what we're doing, making sure we're really properly evaluating. It shouldn't be a vacation or a retreat. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think as Blessing is sort of outlined, this is not going to be an easy preparation. So
well, no, essentially, what I was reading also is this evaluation that is happening now in Pegli, so they're in Genoa,
right,
is mostly to the fact that they want to have as much as finalized as possible, at least internally, with the players that they're going to bring and keep, and not have something disgusting, if I may say, like last year, where basically 95% of the players were not even like, I don't know, from the main squad, because then that summer market kind of happened like in the 31st of October, of August, which was like, that's not what they want to happen. And on top of that, there's also Blessing. We don't really know what's his model, right? Because we're used to that infamous number that I always keep forgetting: 5, 3, 2, 1. Is that it? 3? No, 5, 2, 3. Anyways, that one there.
4, 2, 3, 1. Yeah.
And essentially, is that the question? Let me say that out to you. Is that really Blessing's numbers, like his module, or was he forced to use it because of the squad that he had?
I kind of feel probably more the latter. I imagine he set with a formation that he kind of maybe felt was best and probably didn't want to introduce too much. I think sometimes when you have managers coming in, especially like how tumultuous it was when he did come in and the situation we were in, going through different formations every other match and also trying to figure out the players to play in there is not usually a recipe for success. And to your point, it's not like he was inheriting already a team that had an identity or a vision or any sort of way of playing. So I tend to think that we won't be limited to that formation. He's wanted to play that way. That was kind of how he set up really for I think just about every match he set up with that formation. But What I see, like, I wouldn't be totally surprised if we went to more of a 4-3-3.
We
Or
saw that during the matches too, right? That he
yeah,
changed. So that's one thing I really liked about him. He reminds me a little bit, and I'm sorry if I'm bringing back his name, but he sort of reminds me a little bit of Gasperini, where he was a genius in changing the module throughout the matches, trying to adapt and during the match compared to the other team based on the needs of that moment, whether they are already up, if they want to continue, if they're down and they need to come back up. So he was quite, and I think that Blessin has that talent there too. What do you think?
yeah. I mean, he's definitely adapted mid-match before. He's thrown on different players. I think we have seen. You can say a little bit like, do we know Blessin's exact tactical style? I think it's probably fair for some folks to say we don't necessarily know, but we've definitely seen him make impact substitutions and change formations in ways that have been beneficial for Genoa, those are things that you want to see a manager react to in a match. Sometimes you see managers that they don't make a change until way too late, or they stick with the same formula, even though it doesn't work because it's what they know and it's what their team is supposed to do. He reacts to the situation, and I think that's shown. So, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you though on the earlier point. I don't think we're going to have a lot of like. And I thought it was really interesting. I think some reports are out there suggesting that Sturaro was going to be the captain next season. And I think for me, that's incredibly interesting as a decision and reflective of what Blessin is trying to do. Because I also look at him as kind of this maybe a little bit scrappy, but engine type player, definitely a player that's traveling a lot up the pitch. And if he's the guy that you're saying, this is the leader of our team, maybe formation can be adjusted a little bit. But I imagine, if we're getting on guys from like a winger perspective or even a striker perspective, he's going to expect those guys to track back and make plays, even when we're out of possession. So that'll be really interesting too, as we're looking at players and trying to fill out our squad for the next season.
Absolutely. So it's good that you mentioned about Capitan Sturaro. I think he's the good, as we say in Italian, bandiera. So he's like sort of like that flagship of the team. He started quite early, and he had a spell out in Juventus and whatnot, but still, nevertheless. And I think he I'm not saying that the team has to be built around him, but I think we can still count on his availability, and maybe with that that spogliatoio, so that locker room type of engagement and connection that he can have with the more experienced player versus the younger ones. I mean, I'm not too sure if he can be one of those. I don't know him that well to know that, but I'm sure that being that they have put that captain bandage around his arm, something means that he's doing well somewhere, and it's quite important. So talking about captain, Matt, let's quickly talk about Mimmo Criscito.
Mm-hmm.
So I spread out that rumor, which sounds like a rumor, sounds almost like it was fake, but one of my members from the General Club Toronto, he messaged me and said, "Hey, by the way," he's an owner of a restaurant, and he says, "A friend of mine who owns a restaurant just messaged me and just said that Criscito was in Toronto." This was like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But and then I shared that with the group and so on. And then I thought to myself, but wait, does that mean that he's going to stay? Does that mean he's going to go?
Right.
I mean, he did give himself to stay with the team. What do you think?
I would be surprised, because he made that statement publicly, didn't he? Didn't he put something on his like Facebook, Mr. Instagram?
Mr. Instagram.
I don't know. I can't bring myself to say that he would have said that, and then he still gets tempted by an MLS offer and leaves. But I mean, maybe other things could happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't think he would say that if he wasn't believing it.
Right.
But ultimately, also, it all depends, as he said too. It all depends to the club, not to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is also why the Sturaro decision, of course, is interesting. I mean, maybe we don't know exactly what's going on with Mimmo. Maybe we have some contract things to figure out. I'm not sure. I don't know what Mimmo's salary demands are, what the club is. I mean, it's up to the club thing sometimes is a little bit of like a dog whistle. type thing that players say that basically is, I need to get paid more. I'm not sure if that's exactly what he's saying. I hope it's not. I would understand it given where he is in his career. I don't think it's completely out of the question for him to be chasing the bag, so to speak, as they say. I would be shocked if Blessin wouldn't welcome him back. I think this is a player who knows the club. He's a veteran. He could help with some of that management. I imagine we're going to want to not have a bunch of, I think we're going to have probably a decent amount of players who are from Italy, have played in the Italian system, and clearly like Blessin doesn't know that world as well. I mean, I suppose Duraro also would know it, but I would think that he would welcome him back in open arms. I think if there's any question mark, probably I have to assume it might have to do with what his compensation is looking like, but I don't know.
Talking about compensations, let me just throw you two very heavy weights to our books: Nicola Maximovic and Felipe Caicedo.
Well, I don't know. So this is part of the thing, right? Like we've got this 70 player list. If you were to ask most Genoa fans who they want to get off the list, I think these are two guys they would say immediately. I just don't know how. Maximovic, maybe. I don't know if we can coax like a Cremonese or something to sign up a guy who's got that experience, who maybe they can get a little bit on the cheap and solidify a defensive unit if they need that. Caicedo, I just feel like he's so old. I mean, he's had success obviously with Lazio, and he's had some of his moments, but it's a big amount. I don't know how we move him unless, like, I don't think those magical offers from China are coming in anymore. I don't think he's leaving for Serie A anymore, or no, excuse me, for MLS anymore. Inter certainly probably won't be taking him back. So, I mean, maybe look, he could just big boy some guys in Serie B and actually be a good guy to have on our squad at the end of the day. But this was one of those signings that happened in the summertime. I don't know what you thought when we signed him. I was kind of scratching my head a little bit. It's like, I guess like maybe this could work. And kind of talking myself into it. And then the season started and it was just like, oh man, what did we just sign ourselves up for here? But I don't know. I mean, he wasn't really ever around at all under Blessin. I don't think he fits Blessin's style at all. But maybe he's a target man to throw on in like the 70th minute if things are dicey and he can scrape for us a little bit. I don't know.
Are you saying he's the new Destro?
No.
Is that what I just heard?
No. I'm trying to be optimistic here, Fabri.
I know. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we have a lot of heavyweights that need to be unloaded, essentially. Like, and I mean, others that are not necessary with a huge wage on them. We know about Touré, we know about Cassata, we know about like a whole bunch. And it's not going to be an easy task for 777 to get rid of. Yeah. Whether they are given for free on loan, whatnot, I don't know. I don't see them being sent out on loan and still have their wage on our books. I don't see that happening. It doesn't make sense, I guess. I don't know. Besides, especially like certain players, are you willing to stay in the Tribuna and not even be called up in Serie B? What is that going to do to your career? Unless you're like a Caicedo, which is 33 years old, and say, I'm going to sit in the box and just who cares? I'm going to have just a salary for free for 2 years because I'm done.
Well, that's the biggest worry with him. But I think that's kind of the quote unquote cleansing of the Serie B that maybe works in our favor a little bit, is you at least have players who, if they feel like they're not going to be part of the central plan, they might just say, you know what, fine, I'll walk away from what I'm getting paid here and help me find somebody somewhere else who can give me something that's there. I mean, a couple of players, I'm curious what you think is going to happen with Destro, but also with Caleb Ekuban. I know with Ekuban, there's been some speculation that he may be enticed to stick around. I don't think that Blessin would want him to leave necessarily. But he's definitely one of those players that for me seems like he could be a little bit on the fence of maybe finding some, obviously he's a general player right now, but maybe finding some business elsewhere. What do you think?
Well, two interesting players for different reasons, not necessarily interesting to keep and not necessarily interesting to give away. But this is just my take. I think we've already seen a lot of comments happen that are not necessarily like well thought through, and I think Destro just does not fit Blessen's model. Period.
Yeah.
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think his contract was due at the end of the season, and I don't think anything is going to happen. I think he's done with Genoa, and he is going to just look elsewhere in Serie A.
I think you're right.
And he's going to play well for one of those new teams for sure, if it's one of the new ones or the smaller ones or whatever that might be. Right. And I think he still has a few years left, I believe, to prove. Then we'll hear those comments. You see, if we had kept him, if he was playing well, that's typical. I mean, that you cannot really compare a player that leaves your team with another team, with a different manager, with a different, roster and whatnot. Every reality is different for everybody. Yeah. And we've seen that with many players, and, it'll still happen. And it'll happen also for other teams as well, which did not work for them, but worked better for others or for us.
Yeah. If he leaves, I also feel like this is not going to be one of those things, but there's hard feelings from Genoa fans. He came in, he did his part for most of his time here. Fair play to him if he goes somewhere else. And yeah, I mean, there's no way we're going to be looking at the situation and thinking, man, we were lucky with Ballardini that we were getting goals from him. Like, he was kind of keeping us afloat for the season before last. And it's just something, even when that's going on, that's a worry, because as soon as that dries up, like it happens this season, we're kind of nowhere all of a sudden. So.
Exactly. Actually, let me throw there like a very interesting interview. Actually, I heard that there was an interview from Caressa. Caressa is a very famous Italian news. What do you call those? The people that commentator on for the games. I can't remember for which TV channel, but doesn't really matter. I don't want to do necessary advertising for them, but they had an interview with him and asked about what his thoughts were about Genoa, and specifically, I don't remember, but the one comment I remember, which kind of like made me understand that, I mean, it could have a valid point or whatnot. Essentially, it's, if we had kept Ballardini, we would have stayed in Serie A, no problem. What do you think about that? I had to throw it there, sorry.
I don't agree with it, but I kind of understand it. I understand a little bit. I mean, only because like Ballardini had this black magic thing. We weren't supposed to stay up the season before either, but I think we had enough. The difference, I think, was when he had come on the season before or so, or maybe a little bit before then, we actually had some pretty good players on our squad. We had Scamacca. We had
last year.
Yeah, the year before last. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, when you have that mix, this season we had a different problem, like you mentioned. We had a lot of players kind of leaving. We had some uncertainty. Our squad wasn't really settled until much later on. We lost a lot of players from loan, but I think the hope was we were actually fill those gaps, and we didn't do that. So I think that there's a world where if there's a manager who knew our team well enough to get the most out of them, he was the manager. I think he would have probably set us up in a way. I don't think we would have had the terrible run we had with Shevchenko under Ballardini. I mean, bear in mind, when he was sacked, he was at 17th place, so just above the relegation zone. So it's not, we were safe at the time. It wasn't like we were in 10th or something like that either.
No, and the form was going down. If you look at statistics, it was going downwards. It wasn't going upwards.
Yeah, and it was a time. I'm not sure how you felt at the time of the sacking. Obviously, Ballardini was I think the word is like a servant to the club. It was sort of bittersweet news, but it was also something I thought that was understandable. I think some other Genoa fans may have also, this isn't the manager that's going to take us back to winning a Scudetto.
No, definitely no. Never was and never had been. But that's also a good point that you point there is, let me add to that too by saying, would have he been the right, just based on that comment, obviously, would he have been the right coach under Spurs and with a new management, with the new owners? And essentially, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, Spores' direction and Ballard, I think Spores and Ballardini could have worked together. I don't know of any reason why those two would have necessarily clashed, as sometimes that happens between kind of a sporting director and a manager. Um, I think it could have been just fine, but it depends on the task you're asking a manager of Ballardini's ilk to do. He's good at settling the situation. Seemed like he was good at getting the players fired up. He could find that right kind of balance within the squad, but I'm not sure he's a manager you want to help develop players along. I'm not sure he's a manager you want to really start introducing expansive ideas or some other things, or being really inventive. And that's fine. There's totally a place for managers of that capability. But I think the whole idea of him not being the manager anymore is we're trying to set our sights a little bit higher. We're trying to look differently. And I think maybe we had the wrong sort of, we reached in a way that was sort of unusual before Shevchenko even took over, just because he'd only been in charge of the Ukrainian national team. And typically those positions, I mean, we've seen how well this team's played without him in charge. That team was a pretty damn good team. So it's hard to really make a managerial decision based off of a guy who sees players a couple of weekends out of the year. And that's what we did. And unfortunately, it bit us in the ass. And we used a star name to justify a signing that probably we should have done. But
which is still on our books too.
Also still on our books. That's right. I think for a little while. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that DB would have been the best long-term solution for us. I am very thankful of him. I personally loved seeing him on the pitch. He just had this cool factor with his glasses and this kind of scowl that totally. The shaking the fist,
the punch is like, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
I'm always going to be a Ballardini fan, but I don't think that. I think that it's right for us to think about, like, where should we be going.
Yeah.
And blessing, people are saying, is he the guy or not? Nobody really knows for sure, but let's give this guy a chance. At least there's a shared vision of where the team is meant to go.
No, absolutely. You're right. I think a lot of people were so used to the past management, so the past owner, where he was like left outright, like those Zamparini, at the same level as Zamparini and the guy from Brescia, which I can't remember, where are basically just like sending away managers like 3-4 every year. So people got used to that. So when at the end we got relegated and the last few games we didn't do as well as the expectation and whatnot, I think people were expecting him to be sacked as well. And the surprise of keeping him, I guess, kind of divided the fans in two, where the ones had to have that, like, the longer view, understood that there is, like, we need consistency. We need to build something that is stable and not, like, every 2-4-7 just change someone, versus the other one just was so used to, this is my opinion anyways, like the Preziosiani, or however you want to call them. Does it really matter? Like the type of mentality where you're saying, well, he went bad, so I just need a new one.
Yeah. Well, it's time. Let me just reach for this other guy. By the way, a little bit of interesting trivia for you. Cagliari announced their new manager, I think, today. A guy who had an interesting bookend in the latter parts of Preziosi's reign, Liverani. So this was
Liverani.
This is the guy.
Oh, boy.
Last guy between Ballardini's, I think, last shift before he just was fired, and between Gasparini's second shift. So like that 2013 season, I think, or so. Not a very good 7 games or so that he played for Genoa, or they managed.
But wait, let me say.
Okay, Stefano, fair.
Stefano, which is
the one match that he won, the most important one to win,
which is very important. Yes. But I can see him a decent coach for Serie B.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't think Cagliari's in the wrong for appointing him. I just thought it was funny to see that name pop up, especially given some of the.
As long as we don't see Iachini anymore, I'm okay. I don't want to see that man ever again. Like, seriously, what is he?
God, the coaching carousel at this club is unbelievable. There's some comments too on David and Nicola as well, about had he been in charge of Genoa, maybe we would be fine, which I thought was interesting. I didn't exactly agree with that, but
Well, Matt, listen, if we had Antonio Conte, perhaps we would have been relegated too. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to talk that way.
no.
I'm sorry, like it's obvious. Like, if you look at, if we had Gasperini, let's do a proper example comparison, because these were all former coaches that we had good adventures or good spells with us.
Yes.
If we had Gasperini, we would have been in Europe. Look at that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really talk that way. You can't really think that way. You can't really, compare apples and oranges, essentially. You'd have to see that coach in a specific realm of that situation, of that given point in time in history. And, like Ballardini is not famous, for example, to lead a team from the beginning. Hence, every time he started a season, he never ends it. See with Lazio and so on.
Right.
But he's came 4 times, grateful like hell for him. For what he has done and so on. But, he's a good incoming for, put patches around, essentially, right? At the end of the season. And, like a Nicola. I hope all the best for Nicola. Not too fan of the team he is in with, but there's different reasons, and I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're
But,
good.
David Nicola is another great guy. At least from a moral perspective, I think he's an amazing man. From there to say that he's a great coach, that's a different story. I don't know. I don't want to say I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
So I think this episode was more to talk about, the coach situation and the current roster that we have to get rid of. In the next episodes, I think, just to give heads up for our listeners, we're going to be talking about all those loans that we had that are leaving, possibly. Why not? With the question mark that everybody's interested anyways with Ostigard. And as well as those potential, loanees that were out. If we're interested in, there's a few more names that I want to talk about.
Yep.
That we both want to talk about, essentially. And also transfer rumors for other players that are out there. Are they true or are they not? Should we go to the? Yeah, I know. Should we go to the commercial break?
Let's do it.
And we'll have our amazing guest right after that.
Sounds good.
My name is Fabrizio Cardone, and I approve this message.
And welcome back to our La Lanterna podcast. Matt, we have a special, super extra special guest this week.
We are honored.
His name is Stefano Gaggero. Very Genoese name, by the way. But what's interesting and important about this name, I guess we'll let him talk about it. So I guess before I introduce officially to him, I just wanted to say thank you, Stefano, for all the hard work that you have done so far. And yes, thank you for have brought Matt and I together. And I guess I'll leave it to you first to introduce yourself and tell us why I said that.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good, Stefano. Good. Nice to see you on the podcast, finally.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say that thanks for having me. And I'm very happy to be here. And thanks for the introduction. Maybe I have to pay some money to you for this introduction.
That's how it works, yes.
And yeah, it was really very kind of you. And you thank me for the hard work. Honestly, it's not a hard work, and that's the reason why everything started with these podcast ideas a few months ago. Fortunately, there's a little bit of work, definitely, but it's a fun work, and I'm very happy to do that.
So let's go a little bit. Sorry, if I may. Let's go a little bit more back in time before I guess you jump into this aspect. Introducing where I met you, I guess, and what happened with that adventure. What's happening with that adventure, actually?
Yeah, talking about my podcast, let's say.
Exactly.
Genoani, resta. And that was an idea that started months ago. Let's say that in these last two crazy years of a pandemic, I got closer and closer to the world of podcast. You know, we had to spend some time fortunately here in US, we never had a real lockdown, but we had to stay home.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Yeah, I know Canada was more similar to Italy. US, I can really tell you that. Maybe Matt in New York was
a little different. I mean, I was fortunate where I was, but I would say it wasn't Italy. I'll say that much. So
no, yeah. I can tell you that here in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's the Southern mentality. So I'm not saying that people were around, but it was a very mild and soft lockdown. So I had to spend my time, and I just started listening some of these podcasts. And to be honest, I never listened to the soccer or football podcast or sports in general. I was more like in the interview format with 3 hosts and 1 guest.
Mm-hmm.
That was the idea, and singer, actors, or whatever. So, and I found that format pretty interesting, and I really liked. So that at some point I was thinking, and I had some conversation with some of the Genoa Club New York friends.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we try to do something similar? So instead of keep writing about football on our chat every day, why don't we try to talk about football and do a podcast? And I have to say that at that time I didn't know anything about podcasts, so how to do a podcast. And I realized that it's not that complicated. So a little bit of equipment. So I wrote in my Santa Claus letter, please, can I have a professional microphone? And since I well behaved, so I received a professional microphone. So and I start running some tests and see, and so we honestly didn't do that many tests. So at some point we were like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah,
let's try and see what happened. And initially the idea was to count basically on the group of people of the Genoa Club New York, Genoa Club Miami. So mostly the people we knew, and I only had just a few contacts of other Genoani around the world, and but slowly, a little bit with some help of some Genoa Facebook page that really help us in advertising our podcast, and a little bit of word of mouth. So we start getting more and more interest from Genoani all over mostly Europe, but not just Europe. And so next weekend we're gonna record our episode number 20. So it's been 20 weeks.
Yay!
And
I think it's gone really fast.
I know.
It was. We started back in January, and we do once a week.
Yeah.
We skip I think a couple of weeks, but other than that, every week, if it's with an American guest, we record on Thursday evening. If it's with a European guest, we have to do on the weekend when here in US is like 9 a.m., 10 a.m., which means 3 p.m. in the UK or 4 p.m. in Europe. So let's say that was probably the most difficult part, because getting all of us comfortable with the time of a recording and the day. It's not easy, because and I have to say that lately we had mostly European guests, so, and it's always Saturday morning 9 a.m. with a coffee, and
there you go,
and or Sunday.
We're starting to get that feel too with our last guest last week with Stefan in Germany. I mean, he was very nice and kind enough to give us his time at 5 a.m. in the morning for him. So that was quite amazing. But I'm sure we have some guests already lined up from Europe, and it's going to be tough. And we can only learn from you.
Yes, absolutely.
I have to say that I was a little bit surprised. We had a total availability from our guests, and flexibility. So it's and I'm very happy, and I thank all of them, because it made everything easier for me and for the other two guys, Matteo Cevasco from New York, and Francesco Talarico from Miami. And I think it was the third episode, we had a special guest from Canada.
Yay, that's me.
Because I think Francesco told me, I know the guy in Canada, of the Genoa Club Canada, and I think that initially Francesco contacted you. And so that's what I do. I'm not saying on a daily basis, but I'm literally stalking people on Facebook and try to find more and more people. And as I said, we are going to record our episode number 20, and then we probably have a stop at the end of June. Let's have a break. July and August, it's a vacation time, especially for Italian people, no matter where they live. And we will probably back with the beginning of the new season of Serie B. And but we already have at least another 20 guys ready for next year, for season 2.
Just for our listeners, this is a podcast, beautiful, talking about the experiences of Genoani that live abroad. So this is entirely in Italian, but it's the interesting part, and that's I feel one of those too, because being in episode 3, that was an honor on my perspective, and which kind of tied also
a bronze medal.
A bronze medal. Well, it helped us to tie, our friendship and whatnot. And it was quite interesting to hear. It's still interesting to hear every week the different experiences of Genovesi that moved abroad for whatever the reason. Sometimes you hear for love, sometimes you hear for work, sometimes you hear, I don't know, I just tried and I love it, And it's
that exactly the main focus of our podcast. So when we start talking about this idea, and we had this kind of conversation with Francesco and Matteo, we had several different ideas. Let's do a post-game podcast. But at some point, we realized that there are too many podcasts like this. So, and bottom line, we are not a former player. We're not journalists. We're not anything in the football world other than tifosi, and so who cares what we think about the game, tops and flops of we also have some podcasts doing that, but so we try to remain focused on the experience of people like us, so people that for whatever reason move to a foreign country, and it can be for the last 10 years, for a very recent moving, and the experience of being still connected and still tied to Genova and Genoa, of course. And now they live this being Genoani abroad, which for some people that moved 25, 30 years ago is even more interesting, because it was definitely more complicated to stay connected with Genoa. Now with social media, Facebook and whatever, so we sometimes we have news in real time, so it's definitely easier. But we had some very interesting experience told during these 19 episodes. And the nice thing that we created a sort of a small community, and we have a chat, and we have some other idea for the future for this community. And the good thing is that we're in touch on a daily basis, and it's like having new friends, even if we never met any of these guys. So and this is the crazy part, because even with my two partners, I met, I think, twice Francesco in Miami, because I was there for my job, but I never met Matteo. So,
oh, really?
No, absolutely
I
not.
would have never thought that. Imagine.
Yeah, I would have actually thought it might have been the opposite.
Absolutely not. So, and the same with our guests. So we never met any of them.
So how did you meet Matt?
Well, it was the same. It was a similar thing. I was going to say, Stefano, to kind of what your point was earlier. So Stefano, I think you must have been connected. I think maybe Daniele, who is the president of Genoa Club New York. So he probably mentioned my name when you guys were thinking about doing a podcast. And I think originally it started with kind of like, any Italian, we'd like to get your story as part of kind of the same Genoa si resta kind of concept, but obviously I don't speak as well in Italian. I don't really speak at all, besides Gloria Merida, as you guys know, which in some ways
very important.
You
have to learn to roll the R's now.
I know.
Merda.
I know.
This is the lesson one. It was definitely.
Or the next word is rumente.
Rumente.
Which means garbage.
Yes, that's right.
Ciclisti,
which is the bikers, right?
It was definitely through Daniele, who, by the way, was our first guest. And he told me of this American guy. He never revealed the whole story of this, and he only told me it's a very interesting story. You should know the story. So, and we try to involve Matt in Genoani si resta, but doing an episode with a guest speaking English is not easy. You have to translate. So we try the same with the guy who is probably going to be one of your future guests, Hans Hotten from Netherlands. So but he told me I prefer to do the English one, so no problem.
Mitico Hans, as we say in Italian. Mitico Hans.
Yeah. So starting from that idea, we had some other idea. We had, and we still have two small podcasts, one in Spanish, made by our friend in Barcelona, Enrico Barbieri, called Pitazo Final. And the other one is Triple Whistle, made by Tobia and Alex Pugno from Tobia is in Scotland and Alex is in London. And they are basically post-game podcasts. And then with the idea of try to involve Matt in something, and I contacted Fabrizio and I say, why don't you two do something together in English? And I think the idea of La Lanterna is a very good idea because it's completely different from Genoani si resta. So it's a mix of everything, but I'm happy of the outcome of this podcast. So it's a very good podcast. You go through a little bit of everything of the latest news about Genoa, but also talking about the more technical things. And I have to say that I was really surprised how Matt is so prepared talking about soccer
I do my homework. I think
in American way.
This is Stefano. He's trying to make sure he's collecting the guest fee. I think this is part of the thing. Well applauded for our skills. So thank you, Stefano. But
no, he is true,
Thank you.
Matt. Like once Stefano gave us that kickoff and whatnot, then we took it at hand. We started with that pilot episode, which was episode 0, I guess.
Yeah.
And then from there we modeled it throughout, and it's just where we are right now. And now we're episode 5 or 6, depending if you count them in one way or another. Exactly. So what was I going to say? So then that's how that started. So, but not to mention, I wanted to add the fact that, so yes, you brought us together, and yes, you're saying it's not a big job that you have to do and whatnot, but every episode, I'm sure
right.
Most of our listeners have heard us using your name because you put the little comments here and there. You're also like our director, our production and producer, etc. Right?
I'm always behind the scene, and today is an exception, and I'm the scene. But it's fun, so I enjoy doing this, and as I said, yeah, definitely there's a little bit of work to do, a little bit of post-production, and then posting the podcast, and as long as this is a funny things, and we definitely don't do with any expectation of getting reach or whatever. Fortunately,
right.
we have our jobs, and so it's
Damn, I was about to ask you, are you going to leave your 9-to-5 job for this now?
Okay, good for you. It means that Lanterna is going great, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Maybe it's because of your commercial. So maybe
right? Exactly. So let me ask you a quick question with respects to from a Genovese living abroad. Mind you, yes, of course, you're a lot more involved compared to other guests and whatnot, but you have more of a touch and feel with the larger community, at least from a Genoani perspective. What's their take? What's their idea? What's their thought, I guess, for this podcast? For whomever it was that you were able to share with, to know that there's a podcast in English, does that sound interesting from a Italian/Genovese standpoint?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are regularly listening your podcast, and I told you also my wife that is against any kind of football thing. She enjoyed listening your podcast, and she's practicing and improving her English, and it's and I think it's the same for Genoani si resta. And for La Lanterna. Maybe you're talking a bit more about technical aspects of football, and we try to just on the very last 10-15 minutes talking about the news about Genoa, but this makes everything more interesting for any kind of people, not just for tifosi. So, and of course, it's in English, so my mom won't listen that, but I can tell you. But I think there's a very good potential for this podcast, and as you did in the previous episode, even involving and inviting tifosi of other team, of their Italian team, but not necessarily just Italian team.
That's right.
Might be another interesting opportunity for
more fans
for your podcast. So.
I mean,
of course,
you're so right too. I think, Stefano, and like what you were saying earlier with getting involved in the podcast and then kind of making sort of these friendships with folks that you meet, and even some of our guests, I think you kind of feel that a little bit too. Like there's this bigger community that's out there. First with Genoa, but then also, I mean, too, at least in the US, I still feel like this is kind of a thing. Like the people who follow soccer, it's almost like a sub community within the States, because it's not still quite as much part of like the normal conversation. Like even kind of like hockey is right now, at least in the Northeast, with the Rangers kind of in contention and stuff like that. So it's cool to be kind of part of all of that stuff.
It's interesting too, the fact of you're right, Matt, like this niche that is growing year after year, perhaps also thanks to the MLS and whatnot. Whether you want to call it soccer, whether you want to call it football, doesn't really matter, but ultimately it's a growing community, and definitely we want that little slice of pie and be present there talking about Genoa. And that's essentially what the fun is all about too, right? So then we talk about the culinary aspect with the focaccia dipped into the cappuccino, or then we talk about this is all
we usually sleep on the culinary and things. So, but I think this is probably the main difference between Genoani Resta and La Lanterna. So you can count on a way bigger community because you are talking to the football fans community. We are talking to the Genoa fans community, which is surprisingly bigger than we expected, especially as far as the Genoani living abroad. It's at some point we probably might come up with a new idea, because we will run out of opportunities. But
you might still want to think about also Genoani outside of Liguria, I guess, too.
Yes, and that's definitely something that we are start thinking about, because definitely a Genoano in Puglia, in I don't know, in Sardinia is still a Genoano far from Genoa and far from his team. So it's a little bit different because you're still in Italy, so the culture is pretty much the same. For some reason, it is even more difficult because you have to deal on a daily basis with Inter fan, Milan fan, Juventus fan, whatever, and maybe abroad this doesn't happen. But it's it's still in the idea, in the focus of our podcast, and maybe next year we will start doing that. So.
And from a Genovese, Genoano living abroad, immigrant to North America, in your experience, or with the Genoani that you're speaking to, how does that look like from your perspective, living abroad? Like we heard not yesterday, but last week from Stefan, his experience as a new Genoano, similar, I guess, to Matt. In a way. So these are these new hybrid cyborgs that are coming among our Genoa fans, right? But no, jokes on the side. From a Genoano perspective, living abroad, how is your life when you talk about Genoa with, I guess, other soccer fans, which might be with the big sisters, so Juve, Napoli, Milan, etc., or even with people that, at least I can tell you in Toronto, the biggest piece of viewerships are pro EPL, so English Premiership.
Well, I think that we are probably a different animal. So And most of the people that I know here in the area, some of them are football fan, but not as crazy as me. And but I think it's part of being Genoani. So and I think that sometimes they look at me as a weird animal. So why is so tied to this crapping team? So and it's still spending time and doing a podcast for a team like Genoa, which is an average team, so with a great history, but bottom line, in the last 40 years, we've almost always been an average team. But so it's and the experience of our guests are different. So
yeah,
and it's funny to see, especially not only on the podcast, but also on our chat, the different point of views, the different opinion, and also how they live their passion for football in their country. So we talk with the people that live in a country with a longer tradition of football, like UK or Germany, and people living in countries where football, like US, like football, it's not that popular, and there's no history of that. So it's and also inside their house with their wives that most of the time are not Italian, are not from Genoa. So there is this culture difference, and it's interesting to listen to their story, and every week is different. With the exception of talking about focaccia and how we miss focaccia and other things for Genoa, but it's a very, very interesting experience. So
I always thought, Stefano, what you described for me was one of the things that I kind of latched onto early on when I got into football, because I didn't know very much about anything. And I think probably like the 2006 World Cup, which was also incidentally, Italy won that World Cup, was probably the first time I started really paying attention. But I always thought it was fascinating because it's sort of similar in the US, and being from a relatively small town. Kansas City is not a small town, but I think in the grand kind of understanding of things, it's not a big market. But the fact that you have all of these clubs throughout the world in different places, and you have these real identities behind them, regardless of whether or not the club is successful. I mean, here you have a club in Sacramento that could, in a couple of years, be in Boston or something, because the owners decide there's no passion for the club and they pull a Benevento or something, but actually it moved the club out to a different city. And I always thought it was so fascinating because it's a real part of the identity, and it's something that transcends just the competitive nature of the game, which obviously is a huge part of being a fan. It's not like, it's kind of like some of the teasing that's happened this season with, we're the, number one Tifosi, but we're getting relegated. Like in their comments, even in our group chat, about, I'd rather be in Serie A and be average in Tifosi than be in Serie B and have the best Tifosi or something like that. And people have different perspectives on it, but I've always thought that passion is an interesting thing that differentiates the game from some of the other things that are out there. And I know it's tied, even in some cases, to more than just football, but obviously the club, the team, the history, your experiences there are all part of it. So I think it's very interesting.
Which is interesting. Also, what you said a little bit earlier, Stefano, when you're talking about your podcast before, the Genoani si resta, which actually means Genoani, you remain.
Right.
So just for whoever doesn't know necessarily Italian. The fact that you have never met Matteo, And that's essentially what happened also with myself and Matt. So that means that
Right.
we owe each other sooner or later. By the way, Stefano, you promised you're coming to Toronto sometime soon. That we were promising to each other that sooner or later, one of us or both of us in 2 different trips are going to go and visit each other, and maybe we can do a live podcast from there. I don't know. It doesn't.
Yeah. I was mentioning about this sort of small community. So it's kind of like a club, but it's a club made of people that probably never will never meet, and so this is crazy, but I think it's part of the equation of this new technology. So we live in this kind of world, and podcast is a part of that. You mentioned Genoani si resta, and the title of the podcast was exactly that. So the idea that even if you live thousands of miles away from your roots, you're still connected, and you wanna remain connected to not only to Genova, but most of all to your football team. Mm-hmm. And we also talked about the people sometimes they say I was born Genuano, and you cannot become Genuano. You only born Genuano. And Matt is the example that you can become a Genuano. And we have some other examples. So Stefan is another example
from last week. Yeah,
and this
Hans is another example.
Yeah, this is even more interesting than a pure and real Genuano born and raised in Genoa for me, because it's crazy to think about how they become Genoani. So and how Genoani they are, how passionate they are. So it's
listen, Stefano, this is what we do to them. So we transmit this passion, this craziness, this I don't know, this love affair that we have with these beautiful colors. And that's what the intent is also through our podcast, that we're trying to I don't know, to spread it as much as possible to all our new, and possibly, go in countries we could not even think of, thanks to the English language. And, as you said earlier, Stefano, the fact that we're like a mediocre team so far. So obviously that does not entice people to want to follow and become a Genoano. It's easier to say, I'm going to root for Juventus because they're in the Champions League every year, even though they don't pass the quarterfinals, but that's a different story. No, I'm joking. Or a Milan fan or whatnot. It's easier because, they have more exposure, right? So for us to hear that there are Genoa fans that are from abroad and have adopted this type of love and are learning this passion, or are bringing their own passion to us and showing also different aspects of that, that's just something out of this world, just beautiful.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. So we have this passion that is really stronger than COVID. There is no vaccination, so we
there is no vaccination.
Stronger than COVID.
No, absolutely.
Really good way to say it.
And I think that a Genuano wants to talk about Genoa, no matter what, every day. And this is kind of a difference with some other tifosi, that if things go wrong, they take a break. They literally unplug themselves from the world of football. We are here, so we just a few weeks after a very sad relegation, even if we knew it was coming. So But we are still here, and we enjoy talking about football and talking about Genoa. So that's always been our strength, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a bigger thing than just the result at the end of the day. The result is a massive part of it, obviously. That's how we get the joy that we get from the club. But at the end of the day, you don't see many Genoa fans walking away, I don't think.
No, yeah.
Isn't that beautiful to go abroad and see that red and blue jersey somewhere around the world? Say, hey, he's one of us. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty cool.
Best color ever.
That's right.
So I guess this is a wrap. It was amazing to have you as a guest, Stefano, our producer, our director, our everything. Thank you again for introducing the two of us, Matt and I, together. And we're so happy for the interest that is kind of starting to happen around this podcast. And as you guys always say, it's just about having fun for the passion that we have. And Matt, I'm sure that you can second that, if not even more, from a different perspective too.
100%. No, this is what it's all about. And the big thanks again to Stefano for introducing us. I didn't think I was a podcaster until you reached out, but we're already how many episodes in and we're having fun. So we're going to keep it going.
Absolutely. I mean, we're behind you guys. We're not at 20, but we're still behind you. So don't worry about it. Okay,
guys,
so
I thank you very much and congratulations, because as I said, I really like this podcast, and I want to say this is your podcast. It's even if people is probably seeing my name in the podcast, just because we upload the podcast using my account, but this is Fabrizio and Matt podcast. I'm always behind the scene, but just because I enjoy it. They really don't need me. So it's and congratulations again. And
you're so humble.
No, that's the truth. So, and thanks again for having me. And it's been a very nice conversation with you guys as usual. And Forza Genoa.
And I was gonna wrap that too. Thank you everybody for listening to us. We'll talk to you and listen to us next week. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
For everything, always as usual. And we'll talk next week. And Forza Genoa all the time.
Forza Genoa.
You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Resta. Thank you for listening and see you next week.